Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook. Great Voyage. I, the strongest fighter on the Rock's ship. Chapter 61. He knew that Garp was training seriously, but he still couldn't help but give him a few reminders. Sengoku, don't worry, we are Marines, how could we lose to pirates? Garp said nonchalantly while eating a donut. Yulo's strength has greatly improved and he can compete with Admiral, so what? He is not standing still. When he meets Yulo again, he will give Yulo a surprise. Hearing this, Sengoku felt helpless and speechless. He wanted to know where Garp's optimism came from. You can say that Marine will not lose to the pirates, but Marine has been losing one after another recently. Sengoku, Garp, stop talking nonsense and come over for training. Zephyr put down the newspaper in his hand and said without looking back. He knew he didn't have Yulo's talent, so he could only train harder. Okay, Sengoku, Zephyr, let's train. Even Zephyr spoke. Sengoku was glaring at him. Garp poured all the donuts into his mouth, and yelled with excitement. In this way, Sengoku, Garp, and Zephyr continued training in full swing to become stronger. They are all aware of the gap with Yulo. If they want not to be left behind by Yulo, they have to work several times harder than usual. Therefore, during the training period, the intensity continued to increase. Even so, the three of them still enjoyed it. Now on the sea, Marine has lost all face, and pirates are becoming more and more rampant, especially the Rock's pirate, which is becoming more and more powerful. Only by working hard and making a qualitative leap in strength can the Rock's pirate be eliminated. The waters of the New World. Within a few days, Yulo's ship approached Beehive Island. On an island near Hive Island, Yulo released the Celestial Dragon's slaves on the ship. After learning about Yulo's identity and deeds, many slaves asked to join Yulo's ship and wanted to be his crew. Yulo refused without hesitation. If they could become slaves of the Celestial Dragons, their strength must be insufficient and their talents were mediocre. Yulo has no interest in these people, and there is no use in staying on the ship. At present, he only recruits elites. If you want to become his crew, you must first be qualified in terms of strength. As for the so-called cannon fodder, I'm sorry, Yulo doesn't need it, at least not for now. But in the end, considering the daily needs on the ship, Yulo left the helmsman, cook and ship's doctor behind, and the rest all got off the ship. Ronnie and Al, through continuous practice in the past few days, have initially mastered the fruit ability and thunder breathing. Their spirits are very good, and even their originally thin bodies have become stronger. The luxurious ship cut through the waves, and Beehive Island came into view. Boss, is this Hive Island, the headquarters of the Rock's pirate? Al looked far away, and saw the Beehive Island and the huge skull in his sight. Beehive Island is known as the paradise of pirates, and the huge skull building is the symbol of pirates. Anyone who sees this scene for the first time cannot help but be shocked. We finally arrived, it's really grand. Ronnie clenched his fists and looked extremely excited. The harbor on the coast of Beehive Island is larger than the harbor outside Gota Shengguang City. There are also pirate ships anchored in the harbor, so many that they are almost impossible to count. Arriving at Beehive Island, their journey as pirates is finally about to begin. Hee. Yulo stood at the bow of the boat, smiled and said nothing. At this time, some sharp-eyed pirates near the harbor of Beehive Island spotted Yulo's ship first. The pirates living on the shore are equivalent to cannon fodder. They have no training tasks and are idle all day long. In the blink of an eye, many pirates arrived and gathered at the harbor. Hey, look, a big ship is approaching. There really is a ship. Who is so bold as to dare to sail directly to Beehive Island? By the way, does anyone think the pattern on the hull looks like the Celestial Dragon's logo? That's the Celestial Dragon's logo, but with our pirate flag. As Yulo's ship gets closer, the pirates on the island finally recognize Yulo. Look, it's Yulo on the boat. Kadri Yulo is back. Ha ha ha, Yulo Kadri is back in the Celestial Dragon's ship. And Yulo encountered and injured an admiral, that was a marine admiral. You are indeed a monster Yulo, the speed of progress is too pervert. Naturally, there was an overwhelming response to greet Yulo. Most of them came from old crew members, some from new crew members, but all of them, without exception, were Yulo's admirers. Amidst the cheers of everyone, the luxurious ship docked. Yulo took the lead and walked off, followed by Ronnie and Al. Yulo waved to the pirates and headed to the skeleton castle in the center. At this moment, arrogant laughter came. Ha 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 ha, Yulo, you gave me another surprise. You injured that old guy Herman. You hit Marine hard in the face and elevated my prestige as a Rock's pirate. A breeze blew by, and Rock's figure appeared directly in front of Yulo. For this secret mission, Rox wanted to just kill the celestial dragons. This was his purpose. As for the pursuit of Marine Admiral, Rox is not too worried. Although Yulo is defeated by Admiral, there is still no problem in escaping. But something he never expected happened. Yulo attacked Admiral head-on, even injured Admiral, and finally left calmly. This gave Rox quite a surprise. Rox suddenly appeared, and the pirates suddenly became quiet. They were more and more in awe of Yulo. This was Captain Rox. Among the cadres who returned from overseas, Yulo was the first person to be personally greeted by Rox. Hey, Captain Rox, I was almost exhausted too. Yulo said jokingly with a smile on his face. In fact, he felt awe-inspiring in his heart and couldn't help but be shocked. When Rox appeared, he didn't even see him clearly. The speed is so fast, much faster than Herman. Gee you la la la, boy Yulo, haven't you made a lot of progress this time out? In the distance, Newgate appeared and came to Rock's side. He laughed and looked at Yulo appreciatively. Gee ha ha ha, Yulo boy, I guess you didn't know that your bounty has been increased to 2 billion. Immediately afterwards, Golden Lion Shiki slowly fell from the sky and handed a bounty ticket in his hand to Yulo. Ha, 2 billion, when did it happen? Yulo was slightly startled. He took the reward order and saw that it had indeed been increased to 2 billion. He has been on the boat these past few days, enjoying the sea breeze all day long, and has not paid attention to the news at sea at all. Yulo felt that what he did were all routine operations. Gia ha ha ha, boy Yulo, this is a rare thing. Golden Lion Shiki looked helpless and said angrily. Seeing Yulo's calm look, Shiki couldn't help but feel a little sad. If it were Shiki, the increase in bounty would make him excited. On the other hand, Yulo was calm and composed, without any emotional fluctuations. If there is really no comparison, there will be no harm. In fact, Yulo had already guessed that the bounty was going to be increased. What he did, like pressing Marine's face to the ground and rubbing it, it would be unreasonable for the bounty to go up. Gee you la la la, boy Yulo, that's what Marine is like, if you can't catch him, there will be a reward. Whitebeard Newgate said nonchalantly. He had experienced this kind of thing a lot, and Marine was just such a virtuous person. For those with low bounties, Marine is too lazy to take action, or lacks manpower. Bounty hunters will take action for them, and Marine will just pay the reward. Marine can't catch big pirates like them at all, but they have to do something, and they can only increase the bounty. After listening to what Shiki and Newgate said, Yulo looked helpless and stroked his forehead. After the two of them arrived, they started talking to each other, but Yulo couldn't get in the middle of the conversation. Whose bounty has been increased? Why are you two happier than me? At this time, Yulo was about to speak, but Rock's voice sounded. Ha 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 ha, it's a good thing to increase the bounty. It's a loss to Marine's face and a boost to our prestige. Rox walked over slowly and interrupted the conversation between the three. He has important plans ahead, but he doesn't have time to listen to Yulo and the others chat. Hee. Shiki and Newgate were not fools, so they naturally understood what Rox meant and scratched their heads in embarrassment. They are different from Rox. Rox treats Yulo as a subordinate and cares about Yulo's talent and strength. They regard Yulo as a friend. Shiki and Newgate are sincerely happy with the improvement of Yulo's strength and the increase in bounty. Let's go to the boat and talk. Yulo could see the seriousness in Rox's eyes and thought that Rox should have something to talk to. It doesn't matter. Rox was surprised, glanced at the luxurious ship, and said. For Rox, it makes no difference where the meeting is held. Let's go aboard, there's a lot of wine on Celestial Dragon's ship. Yulo said with a smile, turned around and led the way. The Celestial Dragons are really arrogant. This ship is almost as big as my Moby Dick. After Yulo finished speaking, Newgate noticed the luxurious ship in the harbor. Before, his eyes had been on Yulo and he didn't observe it at all. Now just a glance gave him a visual impact. Newgate's ship was also huge, and in terms of luxury, it was a little worse than the ship in front of me. Thinking that he spent countless money to own the current Moby Dick, Yulo killed the celestial dragons and owned a ship that was not inferior to the Moby Dick. If I had known this, I should have been like Yulo and went straight to kill the celestial dragons and seize the ship. Gia ha ha ha, Newgate, the boat doesn't matter, the important thing is the wine. Shiki patted Newgate on the shoulder and turned the conversation to wine. There was a hint of joking in his voice. This was the first time he saw Newgate deflated. As for Shiki, it's true as he said, he doesn't care about boats or anything. After all, Shiki can use the island as a ship if he wants. Under the odd gazes of all the pirates, Yulo, Rox, Shiki, and Newgate entered the luxurious room of the ship. The pirates gradually withdrew their gazes and slowly dispersed. Ronnie and Al followed Yulo back to the ship and started practicing on the deck wisely. Yulo led the three of them into the room. As soon as they entered the door, they saw two celestial dragons trembling in the corner. This is celestial dragons. Shiki and Newgate were stunned, suddenly confused. Aren't you going to kill the celestial dragons? Why are there two of them lying here? I killed one person and left these two. Yulo pointed to the celestial dragons and briefly explained the situation. Gerald Saint and Ruth Mary Palace were frightened when they saw Yulo pointing over, and their expressions were frightened and uneasy. In the past few days, Yulo on the boat was very idle and often came over to play with the two of them. They felt that they were going to be spoiled. Now that I can't get enough of playing alone, I actually called 3 strong men. This is a rhythm that wants to play them to death. Okay, Yulo, good job. After Yulo finished roughly speaking, Rox stood up with a look in his eyes full of surprise. This action to kill the celestial dragons is to make the celestial dragons and the world government lose face. In this way, Rock's pirate became famous and became more powerful before launching its revenge against Marine. Rox began to think of a way to spread the news through underground newspapers. Unexpectedly, in order to maintain the majesty of the celestial dragons and the world government, the 5 elders used methods to destroy all the information and cover up the truth of the matter. Rox had already prepared other means, but unexpectedly Yulo brought back 2 living celestial dragons, so it seemed that his plan could continue. Were the photos taken of the celestial dragon's kill? Rox asked immediately, with a sinister smile on his face. The 5 old men are deliberately covering up the truth. The harder you try to cover it up, the more I will spread it. As soon as these words came out, Shiki and Newgate suddenly realized. They both knew the truth about this matter. When Rox asked this question, it was obvious what he wanted to do. Of course, I have the photos of people being decapitated, kneeling down to beg for mercy, and being used as mounts. Yulo took out his camera phone and smiled softly. However, what Yulo said next made the 3 of them unexpected. But I don't think these are needed. Yulo smiled mysteriously. No need. Shiki and Newgate looked stunned, but Rox looked quite interested after hearing this. Although Yulo knew he had a plan, he never told the specific details. Maybe Yulo can think of a more effective plan. With these 2 living celestial dragons, there is no need for them. Compared to the truth that 5 elders tried so hard to cover up, these 2 celestial dragons can undoubtedly bring a more explosive effect. The corners of Yulo's mouth curled up slightly, and he looked directly at Rox. More explosive effects. Rox held his chin up, eyes shining, and pondered slightly. As Yulo said, bringing more explosive effects is also part of his plan. But how could these 2 celestial dragons in front of them cause an unprecedented sensation in the sea? If you ask me, just kill him. Shiki thought for a long time, but couldn't think of anything. He figured what else the celestial dragons could do except get killed. If he were killed, it wouldn't necessarily have a more violent response than the photo Yulo mentioned. Newgate frowned and thought repeatedly. Yes, just kill. Rox heard Shiki and Newgate's words one after another, and suddenly an idea came to his mind. Shiki and Newgate were stunned. They worked on it for a long time. It was so simple. Isn't this what they just said? What are you 2 thinking? Why don't you kill the celestial dragons and keep them for the new year? Yulo looked at Shiki and Newgate, who were a little confused, and said jokingly. The celestial dragons want to kill, but not casually, but... In the blink of an eye, Yulo changed the subject, and a mysterious smile appeared. Rox and Yulo looked at each other, and their expressions were in sync at this moment. A ritualistic killing. Yulo and Rox's words were not loud. However, Shiki and Newgate were deafening and deafening. The two men's bodies shook slightly, their pupils shrank, and they looked at each other subconsciously. It was as if lightning struck in his mind, and an idea suddenly emerged. The eyes of Shiki and Newgate changed, the eyes of Yulo and Rox were dark, and the four of them couldn't help but look towards the corner. The whole room was filled with a strange atmosphere. Gerald Saint and Ruth Mary Pallas were frightened to death when four penetrating glances came to them. The two huddled in the corner, their eyes full of fear, shaking violently and sweating profusely. Celestial dragons have not exercised and have the physical fitness of ordinary people, so Yulo and the others did not hear their conversation. But with these four pairs of green eyes, Gerald Saint and Ruth Mary Pallas knew that they definitely had no good intentions. Yulo, Rox, Shiki, and Newgate stared at the two living celestial dragons. Suddenly, they laughed, their expressions synchronized, their smiles sinister. Ah! In the sight of the celestial dragons, four strong men with green eyes suddenly and inexplicably showed eerie smiles. The two pampered, mentally retarded celestial dragons, who had never experienced such a scene, were so frightened that they groaned, their heads pressed against the floor, and they wished they could crawl into the ground. That's my plan, to publicly behead the celestial dragons. Yulo withdrew his gaze, looked at the three people in front of him, and said lightly. Gu la la la, as expected of Yulo, this is so exciting. Newgate raised his glass and drank heavily. The wine was in his stomach, his heart and lungs were agitated, and his eyes were burning. Although he was not a murderous person, he was absolutely disgusted by the ordinary people. As for the celestial dragons, who were inferior to pigs and dogs, Newgate, like everyone else, absolutely hated them. A good thing that can make world government and celestial dragons lose face is something Newgate can only hope for. Hiss. Ha. Gia ha 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 ha. Publicly beheading celestial dragons, it's exciting to hear it. Shiki took a long puff of his cigar and puffed away the smoke, extremely excited. After a brief shock, he felt ready to move deep in his heart, and he couldn't wait to imagine that scene. This approach will indeed bring greater repercussions and will not affect subsequent plans. Rox's eyes flashed and he was silent for a long time. After Shiki and Newgate finished speaking, he agreed with Yulo's proposal. Yulo, that's a good idea, just do it this way. Rox smiled and nodded with satisfaction. He really hadn't thought about what Yulo proposed, but his purpose was very clear. Since Yulo's proposal can better achieve his purpose, his plan will not be affected. That must be to adopt Yulo's suggestion. Rox still has this kind of ambition. Next, Rox revealed all his plans for revenge against Marine. Yulo, Shiki, and Newgate were all involved, discussing the plan with Rox and finalizing all the details. Creak. The door opened and Rox walked out first, followed closely by Yulo, Shiki, and Newgate. Ronnie and Al stopped their training and watched the four people leave. Rox suddenly stopped and stared at the two of them with interest. Ronnie and Al looked at each other subconsciously, and suddenly felt like they were falling into an abyss. Ha 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 ha, the newcomer is good and worth training. But Rox immediately retracted his gaze, laughed and got off the boat. Ha, a terrifying sense of oppression, just the look in my eyes is so terrifying. Ronnie and Al were relieved, breathing heavily. Gu la la la, look at each other with Captain Rox, you two boys are still far behind. Newgate laughed, feeling quite cheerful, and gave a reminder. Yulo nodded secretly on the side. After all, Ronnie and Al had just started. Letting them feel the pressure of a strong person would be a good thing for their future training. However, what Yulo didn't expect was that the stress response the two showed under Rox's pressure was a little better than he expected. In fact, this is indeed the case. The strength of Rox is not only its powerful combat power, but also the momentum that can escape with him. In the entire Rox pirate, except for a group of cadres, no one could stand in the face of Rox. The reason why Ronnie and Al didn't faint was because they had Conqueror's Haki and Rox deliberately controlled it. After Rox left, he immediately recalled the cadres who were practicing outside. 3 days later, the cadres rushed back one after another. Below the skeleton castle, in the vast open space, this is where gatherings are held on weekdays. At this time, in the square, in Rock's Pirate, all the crew members gathered here. For such a big battle, all the crew members are here. With such a massive move, something big must have happened. Are you going to conquer the franchised countries? Whether it was the captain or the crew, this was the first time they encountered such a battle, and various speculations arose among the crowd. The pirates were whispering and discussing among themselves. The whole group meeting had not even started yet, but they were already extremely excited. On the steps in front of the skeleton castle, Captain Rocks was the leader, and other officials stood on both sides. Although Akoku, John, Silver Axe and others among the cadres knew that something big was being announced, they did not know about it. Except for Yulo, Shiki, and Newgate, the rest of the cadres stood there with serious expressions, but in fact they were full of doubts in their hearts. They were instructed by Rocks to train on an island outside, but only a few days later, they were recalled urgently. As soon as they returned to Beehive Island, a group meeting was held, the reason for which was not yet known. Ahem, be quiet. When the whole group arrived, Rocks took a step forward and signaled softly. As soon as the words fell, the sound suddenly stopped, the pirates shut up one after another, and the place became quiet. In their hearts, Rocks is extremely majestic, and no one dares to disobey Rocks in public. All the pirates stood upright, with serious expressions and solemn eyes, staring at the row of figures on the high platform. Without further ado, this whole group meeting will announce a major action. The corners of Rock's mouth curled up slightly, and the reaction of everyone in the audience made him feel extremely majestic. As you have all seen in the past few days, Yulo cadres captured the Celestial Dragon's ship, and there were 2 Celestial Dragons on the ship, living Celestial Dragons. Those Celestial Dragons who live in Mariajoy and consider themselves the nobility of the world. As soon as these words came out, the pirates in the audience were instantly shocked and their faces were full of shock. Countless pirates wanted to scream out, but were forced to hold back their words due to Rock's majesty. On the high platform, Silver Axe and others were also shocked. No wonder the whole group meeting was called, it turned out to be related to Celestial Dragons. And, these are 2, living Celestial Dragons. Although they hate Celestial Dragons, they want to kill them quickly. But in fact, the Celestial Dragons live in Mariajoy. They claim to be world nobles and basically disdain to go out. Rock's pirate cadres can't be branded as Mariajoy. They are all people with a bounty on Marine's head. As long as they get close to Mariajoy, they will be stopped by Marine. What's more, although the cadres are strong, they are not that strong. Even if Celestial Dragons occasionally travels, they are protected by CP0 guards and Marines. If they are really in danger, Marine Admiral will come to the rescue. This results in pirates on the sea having very few opportunities to come into contact with Celestial Dragons. No wonder I encountered the Admiral Land Tiger. It turned out that I had captured the Celestial Dragons. This was great luck. Silver Axe, John and others couldn't help but look at Yulo, feeling a little envious in their hearts. Pirates all hate Celestial Dragons, and Rocks even more so. In their opinion, this is a great achievement. They are all old pirates. Although they have hunted down Celestial Dragons, they have never touched a hair on them. The huge Rocks pirate, currently only Rocks, once killed Celestial Dragons. Yulo joined Rock's pirate less than 2 months ago. Not only has his talent and strength improved rapidly, but he has also repeatedly made extraordinary achievements in action and is deeply valued by Rocks. Now he has captured the Celestial Dragons and attacked Admiral head-on. With such achievements, Yulo's prestige and status have surpassed them. At this point, Silver Axe and others' thoughts turned to heaviness in their eyes as they looked at Yulo. They feel that the pressure of competition is even greater. The talents of Golden Lion Shiki and Whitebeard Newgate put them to shame. Now there is a monster Yulo, whose talent and strength are actually prohibitive. While the rest of the cadres were feeling heavy, only Mr. 5 was thinking deeply and his eyes were shining brightly. At this moment, he also understood that Yulo did not meet Herman by chance at all, but was chasing the Celestial Dragons and being hunted by Herman. As for why there is no sign of Yulo's capture of the Celestial Dragons on the sea, world government and Marine's actions, Mr. 5 does not know. But that doesn't matter anymore. The unprecedented team meeting and the major actions Rocks talks about will cover up all the rumors. Sure enough, Rock's voice sounded like a thick layer of sound. So, I decided. As soon as Rocks spoke, the pirates were shocked and listened carefully with their ears raised. Silver Axe, Mr. Five and others all focused their attention on Captain Rocks. When Yulo saw their reactions, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He was eager to know now, but he would be shocked later. Public beheading of celestial dragons. Rocks suddenly pulled out his long knife and shouted loudly to the sky. A deafening sound swept through the entire Beehive Island, and these 7 words were deafening, echoing in the ears of all the pirates. Silver Axe, Mr. Five and other cadres' pupils shrank, which shocked them to the core. Publicly beheading celestial dragons is equivalent to declaring war on the world government. They had just guessed that given Rock's character, these 2 celestial dragons would not survive. What I didn't expect was that Rocks would be beheaded in public. He was truly a lunatic. The pirates in the audience were slightly startled, and immediately exploded after being shocked for a moment. Is this to kill the celestial dragons, or behead them in public? It's so exciting, I'm so excited, I can't wait. If the beheading is public, the world government and Marine will definitely not stand idly by. Damn, brother, you are afraid of a ball, we are the strongest pirate group. The pirates' faces were red and their ears were red, they were jumping with excitement, and they were talking fiercely one after another. Don't underestimate them just because they are crew members. This is only within Rock's Pirate. Compared with other pirate groups in New World, these can be regarded as the mainstay. World government and Marine, maybe other pirate groups are afraid, maybe they were afraid in the past when they were alone. But after joining Rock's Pirate, all missions, large and small, involve dealing with Marine. Once they have seen the power of Rock's Pirate, they are no longer afraid of world government and Marine. On the high platform, a confident smile appeared on Rock's serious face as the corners of his mouth turned up. His observation Hockey, who was always paying attention to the pirates, heard that the celestial dragons were to be publicly beheaded. They all became excited and impatient, and no one felt timid and wanted to back down. When Rocks recruits crew members, the conditions are very stringent. They must have killed Marines, followed by people with strong strength or good potential. Only those who have been personally intimidated by Rocks can become official crew members. Therefore, these pirates are all desperados. Since they have killed Marine, they no longer take Marine seriously. An unprecedented level of confidence was born deep within Rocks. This is Rock's Pirate, fearless of the world government and Marine. The most important thing is that wherever his sword points, the crew will rush to it. This is the majesty of Rocks. On the contrary, Silver Axe, Mr. Five and other cadres were shocked and worried at the same time. Of course they are not afraid. The crew members in the audience are not afraid, let alone the powerful cadres. It's just that they are in different positions, and what they see and think about are different. They can sit in the position of cadres. In addition to being powerful, they also have outstanding vision. The public beheading of celestial dragons seemed new and exciting to those below. Silver Axe and others also hate celestial dragons, and they have to admit that this is really satisfying. But doing so would be a slap in the face of the world government, beheading the world's noble celestial dragons, and insulting the prestige of the celestial dragons. When it comes to the celestial dragons, the world government is not careless. This can be seen from the fact that after Yulo captured the celestial dragons and defeated the Admiral Tiger, the news only mentioned that the Admiral was defeated, but there was no capture of the celestial dragons. When the time comes, the world government will be furious, and the Marines may come out in force. Although the Rocks pirates are not afraid, they will pay a heavy price. Silver Axe, John, Akoku, Mr. Five and others, their eyes flickered, looking at each other one after another, thoughts flowing in their hearts. They each have their own ideas and do not speak out about this action. On the surface, they have no objections, but in fact they are resisting it in their hearts. Within Rock's Pirate, Rocks is very majestic and the absolute leader. When Rocks speaks at the plenary meeting, it is equivalent to the matter being finalized. Even if the cadres have opinions, they can't change the outcome. What's more, questioning Rock's decision-making in front of the entire crew is simply asking for death. Not even a cadre can offend Rock's pressure. Yulo had been paying attention to these cadres from the corner of his eye, and naturally noticed their uncertain gazes. Sure enough, the cadres were divided and had their own agendas. It was not as reliable as a group of crew members who were united and reliable. The disbandment of Rock's Pirate was also expected. Ahem, Little ones, please be patient. Seeing that the pirates were almost done talking, Rox raised his hands and pressed them down, coughing lightly. Suddenly, the square became quiet, and all the crew members focused their attention on the high platform. This is the most significant operation we at Rox Pirate have ever undertaken. Each fleet is responsible for different tasks. I will hand over the tasks to the cadres later. I hope you will prepare well and make sure nothing goes wrong. Rox glanced at the audience and shouted loudly, pausing here. The pirates couldn't help but clench their fists, excitement overflowing from the surface. In 7 days, public beheading of the celestial dragons. As Rox's voice fell, a surge of murderous intent burst out, directly penetrating the clouds before dissipating. This shocking scene seems to foreshadow the beheading of celestial dragons. In an instant, the pirates in the audience went completely crazy. Wow, haha, this is so exciting. Kill the shitty celestial dragons. After Rox finished speaking, the square became a mess. The whole group is preparing for battle. The whole team is ready for battle. The whole team is ready for battle. I don't know which of the second-tier pirates screamed at the top of his voice, and all the pirates geared up, raised their weapons, and resonated in unison with enthusiasm. Under the sky and above the sea, the cold light of Honeycomb Island flickered, and the pirates' fighting spirit emerged. The more fearless they are, the happier Rox is. Let's go to the conference hall. Rox smiled with satisfaction, turned around and walked into the skeleton castle. Yulo and other cadres followed closely and took their seats one by one in front of the large conference table. The mobilization for this operation has been completed, and now comes your specific tasks. Rox crossed his arms and said seriously. Everyone did not interrupt and listened quietly. They could see that this action was inevitable. Yulo, Shiki, and Newgate, who knew the plan in advance, were no different from the others, and their expressions did not change at all. Through the whole group meeting just now, the public beheading of celestial dragons will soon sweep across the sea. When the world government and Marine learn about it, they will undoubtedly send out a large number of spies and informants as soon as possible. In order for the operation to proceed smoothly after 7 days, the beheading location this time will be Beehive Island, our base camp. Rox glanced at everyone and told the location of the beheading. This is what he discussed with Yulo, Shiki, and Newgate, and wanted to be the first to announce the details. After the whole group meeting just now, even if the other cadres had objections, they knew that beheading was inevitable, and they all had a participant mentality. However, as soon as these words came out, Silver Axe, Mr. Five and others who were listening quietly were shocked and were caught off guard. According to their vision of the operation, the beheading location should be chosen on an outer island, preferably far away from Beehive Island. After all, Beehive Island is the base camp and the foundation of Rox Pirate. Many people's treasury and even their property are all hidden on Beehive Island. Captain Rox, would it be inappropriate to behead the celestial dragons here? Greed made John hesitate for a moment. After thinking for a while, he asked tentatively. He loves money as much as his life, and half of his family wealth is hidden on Beehive Island. Seeing someone asking questions, Silver Axe and others also turned their attention to Rox. Just as John asked, they also felt it was inappropriate. This is their base camp after all, and if they fight Marine, they must not burn the Hive Island to the ground. In that case, even if the operation is successful, Honeycomb Island will be destroyed, which is not worth it no matter how much you think about it. Haha, don't worry, I know what you are thinking. If the beheading site is placed on an outer island, no matter how tightly deployed it is, it won't be as tight as the Hive Island. The world government and Marine spies will be able to access it very easily. Secondly, if the entire regiment is deployed to the outer islands, the Beehive Island will inevitably have an empty defense. Then what you are worried about will still happen. But you can rest assured that the beheading location is on Beehive Island, but that doesn't mean our defense line is as well. Rox's lips curved into a smile, and his eyes shone with wisdom. Rox is well aware of some of the cadres' petty problems. After saying these words, the cadres thought for a moment and then suddenly realized. World government's CP organization intelligence agents and Marine spies are still somewhat capable. Perhaps when facing the Beehive Island, the crew was extremely familiar with it and the defense was tight. They could only explore the outside, which seemed powerless. If it were an outside island, the crew of Rock's pirate and the spies from world government and marine would also be relatively unfamiliar with it. In this case, it is relatively easy for world government and marine spies to obtain information. From this point of view, Rox takes the action of beheading celestial dragons very seriously. I see. In this case, I don't have anything to worry about. John came back to his senses and nodded, indicating that he had no objection. Gia ha ha ha, let me tell you, Captain Rox, how could you let Marine hit you at your doorstep? Golden Lion Shaki was smoking a cigar and suddenly laughed and responded. Don't tell me, just pretend to be cool and act like you really don't know anything about it. The cadres stopped talking and continued to listen to Rox, explaining the specific action arrangements. Mr. Five was sitting at the end, seemingly listening attentively, but actually he was secretly happy. Ha 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 ha, yes, beheading on Beehive Island, marine spies will definitely be useless. If Kong wants to obtain information, he may have to exchange it with me. In this case, I may be able to make a lot of money. The meeting continued until late in the evening. The cadres left one after another, and the pirates in the square had already dispersed, preparing for the operation 7 days later. When Yulo left, he looked at Rox and then walked out of the conference hall with Shaki and Newgate. Marine, prepare for Rox's revenge. In the empty and deserted conference hall, Rox had an inexplicable smile on his face, and his eyes danced brilliantly under the reflection of the setting sun. The underground world, also known as the Dark World. In this era, the Don Quixote family is not yet in control of the underworld. Rather, it was Rox's collaborator who, driven by Rox, became the mastermind behind the underground world. The information Rox obtains on weekdays, in addition to coming from spies within the pirate group, also comes from channels in the underground world. At this time, it was pitch dark inside a room, and you couldn't see your fingers. It wasn't until someone pushed the door open that dim lights came on in the room. Under the dim light, a lean man with a wretched appearance sat in front of a large desk and slowly opened his eyes. Master Garcia, the letter from above. The man came to the desk and handed the letter over respectfully. Garcia was slightly surprised, but still reached out and took the letter. It had been a while since Rox had written to him personally. The information provided during this period was also delivered through the contact person. Is there something important this time? With doubts, Garcia Earl opened and read the entire letter. Holy crap, what a madman, isn't this Rox afraid of death? This is going to send me into impel down. After a moment, he became angry and threw the letter away. Is this a public beheading of celestial dragons? The man's body trembled, he reached out and grabbed the letter, and immediately turned pale with fright and exclaimed. Master, publicly beheading celestial dragons. If we spread this kind of thing, it will definitely attract the attention of the world government and marine. The man's heart was extremely shocked and he said with a trembling voice. Gassy Earl was silent, his face extremely gloomy. Although he is the king of the underground world, he cannot rise to the top. Compared with world government and marine, it still pales into insignificance. On weekdays, it's okay for them to make trouble, and world government and marine turn a blind eye. If the news of the public beheading of celestial dragons spreads, the world government and marine will surely pursue them. But if they don't do this, Rock's pirate strength is no worse than world government and marine. Let people print newspapers and spread them throughout the sea. Then we prepare to move base. Gassier's face changed, and he was extremely conflicted. He finally gritted his teeth and made a decision. World government and marine can hide, but Rox should not offend him. Who knows if there is an informant planted by Rox around him? Okay, let's do it. The man was stunned for a moment, then reacted immediately and quickly took action. There are many news agencies in the pirate world, but there are only 2 that cover the entire sea. On the surface, the news agency is controlled by the world government, but secretly, it is the news agency of the underground world. However, the news agencies of the underground world usually deal in intelligence. After all, the news on the surface, the news agencies of the world government, have already been disseminated. Therefore, there are not many newspapers spread in the underground world, but they are all news covered up by the world government. Yulo killed and captured the celestial dragons, but there was not a single mention in the world government newspaper. Rocks contacted Gacy Earl and asked Underworld to spread it, but received a reply with insufficient information. Garcia Earl stated in the phone bug that the underground world had indeed received rumors, but the relevant personnel, photos, and images could not be collected. These are enough to show that 5 elders used strong and brutal methods to destroy all witnesses and physical evidence. It's because of the public beheading of the celestial dragons that Rocks will let the underworld take responsibility for spreading. This kind of extremely insulting news about celestial dragons will never be spread by the world government news agency. In this way, Rock's goal will not be achieved. And if you want to appoint people by word of mouth, you have to wait until the year of the monkey and the horse, and 7 days is not enough time. At present, only by using the power of the underground world can it spread to the entire sea in a very short period of time. As for the underground world being targeted by the world government, what does it have to do with Rocks? The underground world printed a large number of newspapers in one day. Under frantic operation, it took another 2 days to spread the newspapers all over the sea. Suddenly, the sea was shaken, ranging from the world government and marine, to the royal families and pirate groups, and to the common people and slaves. Everyone looked at the newspaper with fear. Rock's pirates' tyranny and arrogance once again made the world tremble. World government, Mariajoy. The endless palace complex used to be peaceful and peaceful. Boom. At this time, there was a deafening sound, and the huge building in the center collapsed. The billowing smoke and dust rose up, forming a mushroom cloud, as if a big explosion had occurred. It really makes me angry. Damn Rocks, who is he, how dare he? A furious voice came, carrying boundless murderous intent, and dispersed the mushroom cloud. An old man with blonde hair in a crimson suit, his fists covered with armament hockey, exuding murderous aura. At this moment, he was furious, glaring and gnashing his teeth. The endless anger in his heart had nowhere to vent, and he roared in anger and destroyed the entire palace at the same time. In his left hand, he clutched a newspaper with the words, "Public Beheading of Celestial Dragons," clearly printed on it, as well as photos of 2 living celestial dragons. This newspaper was particularly dazzling in the eyes of the old man. His eyes were like sharp thorns, staring at the 3 words Rocks. Rock's behavior was so arrogant that he dared to publicly behead celestial dragons. Yulo had killed the celestial dragons before, but they hadn't settled the matter with Rocks yet. Now that they were taking things too far, it was no longer as simple as defying the world government. The public beheading of the celestial dragons will not only destroy the celestial dragons, but also the majesty of the world government for 800 years. It is a public execution of the world government on the sea. In the past 800 years, this is the most embarrassing incident that the world government has encountered. Thinking of this, the old man's anger became uncontrollable. Rocks, The old man gritted his teeth, his face turned red, his hair stood on end, and he let out a deep roar, and the newspaper was shattered into pieces. He clenched his black fists, and murderous aura surged crazily throughout his body. Okay, calm down. You have destroyed the palace, what else do you want? 2 figures flashed past and appeared on both sides of the old man. Their thick and powerful palms placed on the old man's shoulders and pressed down hard. The majestic power blocked the old man's armament hockey, and the murderous aura on his body slowly dissipated. Just when the old man calmed down, 2 figures appeared on the ruins. When will you change your irritable temper? The old man in white robe on the left retracted his palm. He understood the blonde old man's character, and there was no blame in his tone. Just this nice palace was destroyed in his rage, and the 4 of them teleported out in a hurry. Snort. The blonde old man snorted angrily and walked away. A moment later, in another palace, in a conference hall. The 5 elders sat around the circular conference table, their faces gloomy as water, and their hearts filled with anger. The Rocks pirates' public beheading of celestial dragons is something we must handle appropriately. Otherwise, not only will the major families be unable to explain, but that adult will also blame me and others. The leader, the old man with glasses, had his thoughts flowing for a moment and said in a deep voice. The impact of this incident was extraordinary. It was the most difficult incident since he became a 5 elders, and he had to treat it with caution. It's true, word has spread across the ocean and everyone is paying attention to what we're doing. Our next response measures are directly related to the world government, its prestige among the participating countries and the people. The long-bearded old man sitting on the side, his eyes flashing, was the second to speak. In this case, we must choose to take action, otherwise the majesty and reputation of the world government will be severely affected, or even violently turbulent. Another old man said this, and the 5 people fell into silence again. They know very well that if the world government chooses not to take action, it may seriously threaten the rule of the world government. As an important part of the world government, celestial dragons are all descendants of the people who founded the world government 800 years ago. It is their duty to protect the celestial dragons. If even celestial dragons fails to save the team, the participating countries will inevitably die in despair, and the hearts of the participating countries will inevitably become unstable. But our plan has not been implemented for a long time. If we choose to take action, the plan may be delayed. At this time, the old man in white robe expressed his concerns. It is inevitable that the world government will choose to take action. It is inevitable that the plan will be delayed. Changes during the implementation period are inevitable. We have already made preparations, as long as the final result is what we want. The words of the leader, the old man with glasses, were incomprehensible, and he seemed to have already made a choice. HMPH, if you ask me, there is no need to delay, rocks can be eliminated this time. The blonde old man got angry and slammed his hands on the table. It was very obvious that he was mentally inferior to the other 4. Don't underestimate rocks. If he was so easy to deal with, he would have been destroyed by Marine long ago. It still takes until today. Let us make sacrifices and formulate this so-called plan to deal with him. Next to the blonde old man, the old man who had never spoken a word directly spoke up. He couldn't stand it for a long time. Forget about his anger just now. He was calmly analyzing during the meeting, and you were the only one who was messing around. This rescue will not be successful. Since Rox dares to behead him publicly, he must be fully prepared. Secondly, he must have a purpose for doing this, but we don't know. But that doesn't matter anymore. Let's send out all the Marine troops. After all, it is for the world to see. It must appear grand to be convincing. The eyes of the old man with glasses shone with wisdom, and the reflective lenses made him look even more mysterious. The empty conference hall was extremely quiet at this time. The incident that caused the sea to shake, the 5 elders made the best choice after a short conversation. After the highest action order was issued, the 5 people still sat in their seats and thought deeply. The 5 elders know that even if Marine's entire army attacks, they can't save the celestial dragons. What's more, the celestial dragons family has deprived them of their identity as celestial dragons. They are already a disgrace to the celestial dragons, and they will not escape death even if they return to Mariajoy. Whether it's Rox Pirate, world government, or Marine, the 2 celestial dragons are bound to die, and they are the tragic victims. But the various alliance countries on the sea do not know the secrets. What they want to see is how seriously the world government and Marine take this incident. Therefore, after knowing the outcome, the world government still has to send troops to rescue, at least on the surface, so that all participating countries can stay honest. In the current ocean, the Rox Pirate alone has already caused world government and Marine to suffer. If trouble occurs again in each franchise country, the situation will be very unfavorable to them. Due to the appearance of Yulo and the incident of snatching the gold from the sky, they found that Rox Pirate had been silent for a while, and there were many new members who were growing rapidly. Coupled with the older generation of strong players, Rox Pirate's high-level combat power has a tendency to suppress Marine, not to mention the unfathomable Rox. The 5 elders have never underestimated Rox. After all, this is the person they all fear, but they have underestimated Rox Pirate Group, with a constant stream of talented newcomers. As a result, they formulated a plan to completely eliminate Rox. They previously covered up the news that Yulo killed the celestial dragons because it would affect the implementation of the plan. What the 5 elders didn't expect was that Rox played a more cruel trick, forcing them to put the overall situation first, postpone the plan and dispatch all Marines. Naval headquarters on the other side, Marineford. Newspapers of the public beheading of celestial dragons spread throughout the sea. The 5 elders of the world government received the news, and the naval headquarters naturally also knew it. As soon as he learned the news, Kong summoned 3 admirals, and the 4 gathered in the marshal's office. Each of them held a newspaper and silently scanned the contents on the ground. The atmosphere was incomparably frozen. Kong frowned and his face was gloomy. He couldn't understand why the 5 elders didn't issue the order last time Yulo killed the celestial dragons. But the nature of this time was extremely serious, and he guessed that troops would have to be sent. This was why he summoned the 3 admirals. Sure enough, a moment later, the phone bug rang. Bulu Bulu. Hey, I'm Sora. Kong's eyes narrowed and he answered the call. His voice was heavy and his sentences were concise. The 3 admirals across from him were shocked and couldn't help but sit up straight. Kong, you must have read the newspaper. Rox is going to publicly behead the celestial dragons. The majesty of the world government and the celestial dragons cannot be violated. Marine immediately prepared its troops and set out to rescue the celestial dragons. The voice came out of the phone bug's mouth, and it was the face of the old man in white robes. Then who's in charge of naval headquarters? Kong and Admiral were slightly startled, and then Kong asked in a deep voice. He guessed that Marine would attack this time, but he didn't expect that the whole army would attack. As Marine Marshal, he naturally has to consider Marine. If all troops attack, naval headquarters will be empty and unguarded. Don't be afraid of anything, just be afraid of the unexpected. Although Rox Pirate is the only one, there are pirates on the sea who are not afraid of Marine. If someone takes this opportunity to raid, naval headquarters cannot resist it. You don't need to worry about this. The world government will send people to temporarily station it. The old man in white robe had already made arrangements and said lightly. I understand, take action immediately. Kong hesitated for a moment when he heard this, but then he agreed honestly. It was somewhat uncomfortable to send others to garrison the naval headquarters while they had to attack with their entire army. However, Kong did not continue to care. As Marine Marshal, the overall situation was the most important thing. This was not the time to worry about such trivial matters. After all, when it comes to the obligations and responsibilities of protecting the celestial dragons, their marines are the first to bear the brunt. Kong, you should be able to understand the purpose of this operation. The words of the old man in white robe made the 3rd admiral stunned and confused. Don't worry, I understand. Kong knew it in his heart, and it was exactly what he thought. When he gave the order to the 5 elders, he had already guessed in his mind whether Marshal Marine had some brains. As soon as he finished speaking, the phone bug hung up. Marshal Kong, what do the 5 elders mean? Isn't this the rescue of the celestial dragons? The flying dragon Admiral Quincy's eyes flickered and he frowned and asked in confusion. As the highest combat force in naval headquarters, he still has the authority to know these things. Quincy does not shy away from this, not to mention his character is straightforward. The other 2 admirals, Herman and Islet, guessed and were silently meditating. Alas, the celestial dragons are in the hands of Rox, and we basically can't save them. As the Marshal, Kong knew Marine well, and he knew that even if the entire army attacked, they might not be able to defeat the Rox Pirate. Since it is unknown whether the fight will be won or not, the chance of rescuing the celestial dragons is even slimmer. So, it's very clear that 5 elders was not about rescuing the celestial dragons in the first place. Looking at it from the perspective of 5 elders, it must be to use Marine's attack to stabilize the hearts and minds of the various participating countries. Snow Leopard Admiral Islet raised his head and took over Kong's words. Another point is that the battle between Marine and Rox Pirate is inevitable. I think 5 elders will take this opportunity to let us test out the current strength of Rox Pirate. Earth Tiger Admiral Herman's eyes flashed with brilliance, and Yulo's green fire was still fresh in his memory. He is the only one among the 3 admirals who has come into contact with Yulo. He feels that Rox Pirate is different after Yulo becomes a cadre. The current world government and Marine are still at the stage of what they were a few months ago when it comes to Rox Pirate's strength. After several months of expansion, Yulo's influence during this period attracted a large number of pirates, including some strong ones. There are also cadres like Silver Axe, John, etc., who have definitely improved in the past few months. This information cannot be obtained by spies and informants alone. It must be verified by fighting with them personally. The best example is Yulo, whose actual combat power and intelligence records have nothing to do with it. At this point, Quincy had already realized. Kong stood up, followed by the 3 admirals. Buzz, buzz, buzz. As usual for Marineford, the sirens suddenly sounded. This is Level 1 Combat Readiness Alert. Sirens rang throughout the naval headquarters, and countless soldiers raised their heads in disbelief. As soon as they got the newspapers from the underground news agency, the highest combat readiness alarm went off, which was enough to illustrate the seriousness of the incident. The Marshal and Admiral reacted really quickly. As soon as we received the news, the entire army was ready for war. In other words, Rox dared to publicly behead celestial dragons. This is too outrageous. Stop talking and gather together quickly. This is not what we should discuss. Our duty is to eliminate the pirates. The soldiers at naval headquarters also had some 8 trigrams constitution. They were very shocked, but they did not dare to say too many words. As a Marine who maintains maritime security, he is much more disciplined than pirates. With whispers, all Marine soldiers quickly gathered. In the Marine training ground, Sengoku, Garp, and Zephyr had also received the news and stopped their training. These troublesome celestial dragons can really cause trouble for Marine. Zephyr clutched the newspaper in his hand and said angrily. Being jealous by nature, he has no favorable impressions of the celestial dragons. After all, the celestial dragons' actions are no worse than those of the pirates. Speaking of which, Rox is really capable of causing trouble. It's only been a while now, and the moves are coming one after another. Garp stopped training and ate donuts, marveling at the content in the newspaper. Like Zephyr, he hated the celestial dragons, and seeing the celestial dragons beheaded did not inspire justice in his heart. If it were the innocent people at sea, he would definitely have an overwhelming sense of justice. That's enough for you two. Let's talk about this in private. It is Marine's duty and responsibility to protect the celestial dragons after all. Sengoku heard what the two said and couldn't help but remind him. As soon as he finished speaking, the alarm sounded, and the 3 of them were stunned. Although they had read the newspaper just now, they had not received any news about the match, and their training plan had not been completed yet. They thought they would continue training. Ha 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 ha, this is the first time I've heard this siren sound of military readiness since first joined Marine. Zephyr's state suddenly reversed, and he burst into laughter. This alarm means that the entire army will attack, and a battle will inevitably occur. Last time they were defeated and lost the heavenly gold, this time they will definitely avenge their disgrace. It's time for an all-out Rox pirate attack. Garp put down the donut and muttered to himself, with fighting spirit rising in his eyes. The unfathomable depth of Rox and the cyan flame of Yulo are still fresh in his memory. There is no time to waste. Although we have not completed the training plan, we have also made great progress. This time we can just test the training results. Sengoku's eyes flickered, and he picked up his shirt and put it on. He didn't know what was going on, but he felt inexplicably worried. But now that the situation was urgent, he couldn't let his thoughts wander, so he rushed to the meeting point with Garp and Zephyr. In front of Naval Headquarters, Crescent Bay Square. Marine soldiers gathered, fully armed and ready to go. On the high platform, Marshal Kong was shouting, and 3 admirals stood on both sides. Army attack. Rescue the celestial dragons. Destination Beehive Island. Target Rox pirate. Following Kong's order, the Marine soldiers took action. Buzz, buzz, buzz. In Crescent Bay, dozens of warships launched, and the sound of horns resounded throughout the sky. At this time, 4 figures flashed past, and Sengoku and others appeared on the high platform. Marshal Kong, 3 admirals, here we come. Sengoku, Garp, Zephyr, and Crane all saluted and said hello. 3 admirals smiled and nodded slightly. We'll hurry up and set off, and we'll let you know the details on the way. Kong's expression was serious and his tone revealed dignity. Then the 8 people jumped down and swept towards the warship. Dozens of warships sailed out of Crescent Bay and advanced rapidly. Somewhere in the New World. This is the Roger Pirate Group's one of the few territories currently. On the deck of the pirate ship, Roger, Rayleigh, Jabba, and Bullet were sitting together. During this period, Rox pirates' actions have become more and more frequent, and they are all targeting the world government. Does Rox think that his pirate group can now compete with the world government and Marine and has already started to take action? Rayleigh and Jabba spoke one after another, and they looked at each other, and you could see the solemnity in their eyes. As Roger's right-hand man, they are always thinking about Roger. The Rocks pirates' domineering rule is the only obstacle to Roger becoming the Pirate King. In particular, Rocks wanted to overthrow the world government. To this end, he burned, killed, and looted all over the sea. Except for a few individuals, they were all cruel and murderous people. Such a pirate group is no longer a pirate group, it is simply a terrorist group. I don't know if it can compete with the world government, but since Yulo joined, Rock's pirate strength has increased a lot. Then Yulo's strength and record made the pirates even more excited. It is said that the guy from Newgate even trained the crew himself. Roger was rarely silent, not knowing what he was thinking, but Bullet, the youngest, expressed his opinion. When he mentioned Yulo, his eyes couldn't help but show fighting spirit. When Rayleigh fought Yulo before, he happened to not be on the boat. Yulo has become famous during this period, and Bullet would really like to learn from him if given the chance. Captain Roger, Vice Captain Rayleigh, this is the news I just received. Ha 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 ha, Marine actually mobilized all the troops. It seems that the 5 old guys are very angry. At this time, a pirate ran over, and Roger laughed after reading the news. All Marine troops dispatched. That's enough for Rocks to drink. Jabba was startled when he heard this, feeling a little surprised. After all, this is the first time that Marine has mobilized its entire army. Even if all Marine troops are dispatched, they may not be able to save the celestial dragons. But there is a rare opportunity, and we can take this opportunity to understand the strength of Rock's pirate. Rayleigh thought for a moment, a smile appeared on her face, and Bullet nodded in agreement. Ha 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 ha, Rayleigh, Marine's purpose is probably the same as yours. You're right, pay attention to the battle situation for the time being. If there are any changes, wait for the opportunity. Roger stood up and looked along the sea into the distance, which was exactly the direction of Beehive Island. At the same time, Burndy World and Beloric Redfield, the 2 big pirates who surrendered to the New World because of the power of Rocks, also rushed to the New World non-stop. I want to witness the biggest battle in history between Marine and pirates that is about to happen. 3 more days have passed since Marine was dispatched. There was only 1 day left before the public beheading. Over the past 3 days, the sea has become increasingly turbulent, and New World has become even more stormy. Rocks pirates' public beheading of celestial dragons and naval headquarters full force attack spread wildly across the sea. Although the Rocks pirate and naval headquarters forces have not yet met, an unprecedented storm is brewing. There are rumors in the underground world about this so-called storm, which is rare to see in 100 years. Countless powerful men on the sea flocked to New World. In just 6 days, New World became the center of this storm. At this moment, Beehive Island, Rocks pirate, one of the parties involved in this storm, is making final arrangements. I have made the final arrangements clear and we will take action immediately after the meeting. Rocks, who was on the main seat, explained seriously. There are not many things that the dignified Rocks can take seriously, and this plan is one of them. He is determined to win. Silver Axe, John, Mr. 5 and others also took it seriously. Facing the offensive of the entire naval headquarters army, as Rocks pirate cadres, they had to bear some responsibilities. In addition, as I said before, there will be some personnel adjustments. Every officer responsible for stationing on Beehive Island will assign me a captain and his crew. Afterwards, Rocks looked calm and slowly glanced around the officials. Silver Axe and others were stunned, their eyes flickered slightly, and they immediately realized that this was the so-called personnel transfer. They thought of the arrangement just explained by Rocks, with Rocks, Newgate, Shiki, Yulo and Linlin, and Kaido guarding the front, while the others were stationed on the base camp Hive Island. After this deployment plan was announced, Silver Axe, John, Akoku, Mr. 5 and others naturally had no objections. The front line is considered the first line of defense, and must face the entire naval headquarters army. If they fight head-on, they will suffer heavy losses. They secretly have selfish motives and do not want their own strength to be damaged. Now that such a good thing has happened to them, they don't have to face the pressure of the front line, they only need to guard the Beehive Island well, which they can only dream of. Secondly, Rocks pirate, after this period of development, they know that their strength is not as good as Shiki and Yulo, and their potential is not as good as Linlin and Kaido. In this case, how could rocks personally lead them and guard the most important first line of defense? Aha! In the flash of lightning, their thoughts were flowing, and they nodded in agreement. A mere captain and his crew are nothing to them. Compared with the cost of defending on the first line of defense and facing the entire naval headquarters army, these are not worth mentioning. What's more, although Rocks and others are extremely powerful, it is still a bit too reluctant to have a full-scale confrontation with naval headquarters. Looking at it this way, they are stationed on Beehive Island and have a large crew. It is reasonable to allocate a small team to Rocks for assistance. After all, compared to the two, Rock's side requires a large number of crew members. Rocks sat on the main seat, with his hands crossed and resting on his chin, his eyes shining brightly. After a while, the meeting ended and the cadres left and began to deploy. Silver Axe, John, Akoku and others, after returning to the ship, began to hand over the mission. The officer, Mr. 5, had a serious look on his face all the way. He returned to the boat and entered the room, and never came out again. After a while, Mr. 5, a captain on the boat, walked in casually holding a wine bottle. "Captain, here I come." After entering the door, the man put down the wine bottle and sat opposite Mr. 5. Quote, quote. Mr. 5 opened his mouth and told him what Rocks said. "Captain, what do you mean? Let me follow Rocks for now." After hearing this, the man thought for a moment and asked. Mr. 5 told him this, not just for him to listen to. He knew it well. "That's right. If you follow Rocks, if anything happens, you can report to me in time." The corners of Mr. 5's lips curled up, seeming to be very satisfied with this decision. He had this idea as early as when Rocks mentioned personnel deployment during the meeting. After all, he is different from Silver Axe, John, Akoku and others. Although Silver Axe and others have a lot of Shao Juju in their hearts, they all have one premise, that is, they will not betray Rocks. But Mr. 5 is different. He has already betrayed Rocks, secretly reached a deal with Marine Marshal Kong, and has been providing information to Marine. Therefore, his thoughts were different from those of Silver Axe and others. Since Rocks asked for the deployment of personnel, he would send the captain in front of him who had been dragged into the water. "Wouldn't it be nice if I could get some useful information and make a fortune from trading with Kong?" "Okay, I get it." The man's eyes flickered vaguely, and after hesitation, he opened his mouth and responded. Even though he was a little reluctant, he still agreed. Mr. 5 was his captain, and he didn't dare to disobey this order. "What are you afraid of? Use your head when doing everything. There are so many people fighting in a melee. Who can notice you? If we really start a war with Marine, you will hide your strength and only find weak ones to fight with, so that the strong ones will not be able to find you." Mr. 5 is also a good person. He noticed the hesitation of the person in front of him at a glance and impatiently gave him advice. In fact, he just talked about the experience he had gained over the years. "The captain is right, thank you captain for reminding me." The man was worried at this time, but when he suddenly heard Mr. 5's words, he suddenly understood and showed an expression that I understand. "If we can really get useful information, the benefits will be yours." Through words, Mr. 5 drew a big pie, waved his hand, and signaled to leave. "Captain, don't worry." The man was overjoyed when he heard what he said, and after he said his vows, he turned and left. This is what he has been waiting for. In the past, he would always get generous rewards for helping Mr. 5 deliver news. Now, with Mr. 5's reminder and commitment, he feels full of motivation. Mr. 5 sat alone, showing a greedy face, even worse than John. On Beehive Island, after some arrangements, various cadres dispatched teams and rushed to the harbor where the fleet was berthed. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The horn sounded, and the three huge main ships slowly sailed out of the harbor. Led by Yulo's ship, the three ships headed towards the entrance of New World, which is the only way Marine must pass. Three large pirate ships were speeding on the sea, with Rock's pirate flag flying on their masts. Rock's officers and captains were concentrated on Yulo's ship, and the rest of the crew were on the other two ships. On the wide deck, Rock's glanced at all the captains, his calm and intimidating eyes making everyone afraid to take a breath. When he saw the captain sent by Mr. 5, his eyes flashed with a faint glint, but he still glanced over without changing his expression. Yulo on the side noticed it, rolled his eyes twice, and glanced at the man. It's him. Under Mr. 5. Yulo thought for a moment and then came up with it. After discussing the plan with Rox, Newgate, and Shiki, he wanted to let Yulo understand the situation in the group. Rox told Yulo all the information about the cadres and captains in the group. As for the ordinary crew members, it was not necessary. The person he and Rox were paying attention to was the captain of the cadre, Mr. 5. Although he was not the strongest, he was most used by Mr. 5. The captains sent by other cadres are all weak in strength, low in potential, and not reused. However, Mr. 5 is just the opposite, sending his own confidant. Although nothing can be proven now, it is at least worth noting. Haha, wait and see the show. Yulo looked at the cadres, his eyes flashing, and he thought to himself. This so-called transfer staff was also negotiated by them. Now that it is confirmed that the mole is one of the cadres, all suspected cadres are asked to stay on Beehive Island. Rox is not a fool. He knows their Shao Juju, which just suits their needs. They are not needed for this operation anyway. We can also take this opportunity to test them and see if they can dig out the Marine Insider. Now if the Insider wants to obtain information, he can only get information through the captain sent by him. If some people take action, their feet will definitely be exposed under Rox's nose. Of course, this is just an additional plan, and the first one is to take revenge on Marine. The pirate ship sailed for a while and reached the frontline sea area. The ship slowed down and moved closer. At this time, Rox's phone rang. He went to the cabin to answer it, and came out within a moment. As Rox walked, he nodded to Yulo, Shiki, and Newgate without leaving any trace. The real action is about to begin. Yulo, Shiki, and Newgate all understood, and their fighting spirit rose in their hearts. Linlin and Kaido were confused, but they didn't show anything. The people on the other two ships are waiting for orders. Let's explore the sea ahead first. Rox looked around and shouted to him. Yes, Captain. People on the boats on both sides responded and began to prepare their weapons. Yulo's boat continued to move forward, and soon the hull behind it disappeared from sight. All the captains had doubts in their hearts, and the ship's speed became faster and faster, heading towards the edge of the new world. Didn't you say we should explore it? This distance is too far. The captain under Mr. 5 noticed the problem at this time and muttered to himself. But Rox didn't say anything, he could only observe silently. Shiki, Yulo, let's start. At this time, Rox spoke, looking at Yulo and Shiki with a chuckle. Gia ha ha ha, I can't wait for a long time. Shiki was so excited that while laughing, the entire hull floated, and soon it reached high altitude, much faster than at sea. What's going on? Why is the ship flying? Idiot, this is Shiki-sama's ability. When the captains saw this, they couldn't help being a little surprised and started talking. Look at me. Yulo looked at everyone and smiled, then stretched out his hand and threw out 2 balls of compressed green fire. The next moment, the hull at the rear opened, and 2 metal cannon barrels protruded. Green fire spewed out from them, creating a powerful propulsion force. The speed of the ship increased sharply and flew away at an extremely fast speed. Oh, let me go, this is too fast. We are getting further and further away from the defense line. Where are we going? Don't ask what you shouldn't ask, just follow the captain and the officers. The sudden acceleration caused a few of the weaker ones to stumble, while the others were also puzzled and started talking about it. As for Mr. 5's subordinate, his expression suddenly changed, realizing that the situation had changed. Young men, I think you all know the news about Naval Headquarters dispatching all troops. Rox saw this, raised the corners of his mouth slightly, and then shouted to everyone. After this sound, all the pirates fell silent. This operation to behead the celestial dragons is just a pretense to divert the tiger away from the mountain. Now that the Naval Headquarters is empty of combat power, we went to destroy Marine's lair. Rox looked at everyone with a half-smile and revealed the true goal of the action. The pirates were stunned, but they immediately reacted and were as shocked as if they had been given blood. Ha 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 ha, attacking the Naval Headquarters is more exciting than publicly beheading the celestial dragons. I didn't expect this to be our action. The current Naval Headquarters is vulnerable. Captain Rox is so powerful, he makes Marine spin around, ha 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 ha. Everyone was excited, gearing up, and screaming. Seeing this, Rox and others turned around and entered the room on the ship. In the room, Rox, Yulo, Shiki, Newgate, Linlin, Kaido, 6 people were sitting around. After Rox explained to Linlin and Kaido, they understood. Naval headquarters. Kaido gripped the mace tightly, fighting intent burning in his eyes. Rox, Yulo, Shiki, and Newgate released observation haki, covering the entire ship, and any disturbance could not be hidden from them. The captain is right. Fortunately he let me come. Outside the cabin, Mr. Five's men had solemn expressions and their eyes kept flickering. If they didn't know such important information and didn't trade it to Marine, their financial path would probably be cut off. Fortunately, Captain Mr. Five sent him here, and he had to find an opportunity to tell Captain Mr. Five the news. He stood there with his thoughts in doubt, hiding himself by acting just like everyone else. After a while, the others were still chatting happily. Seeing that no one noticed him, he quietly slipped to the corner of the stern of the boat as if nothing had happened. Then he looked around, carefully took out a phone bug, and made a call quietly. Bulu Bulu. What happened? The phone dialed, and a soft voice rang out. Mr. Captain Five, it's like this. The man squatted down facing the board and spoke softly. At this time, in the room, the corners of Yulo's mouth curled up. Rox, Newgate, and Shiki also laughed. Thanks for watching, please like and subscribe.